there, guys, and welcome to the Talking Crap and Mania. It's WrestleMania special, and this is the first of 3 videos you can be seeing this week throughout YouTube and Facebook. Don't forget to check it out, to like, share, and subscribe. I'm joined by Jay Jack Toreno, of course. We're going to be discussing some of the favourite and some of the best WrestleMania moments in history. Coming up on this episode, we're going to have interviews from Andros Jay, from Jack Toreno, and of course our very own Champagne Charlie. That's coming up next. So first question to you then, Josh, what's the first WrestleMania that you watched?
The first Mania I watched was Mania 22.
Oh, you're so young. I forget how young you are.
Although I didn't watch it on time, I watched it like a month or 2 later on video. You remember videos? Yes. You know, a friend of mine gave me a videotape. He was like, watch this if you like wrestling. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Obviously, I wasn't watching WWE at the time. I was watching TNA.
How old were you when you watched WrestleMania 22?
What year was 22?
15 years ago? 2006,
So I was like, if it was 15 years ago, I would have not even have been 10. I think I was like 7 or 8. But yeah, Mania 22 was the first one I watched.
Yeah, and is it? I think the first Mania you watch, you get attached to a bit, don't you?
Yeah.
I know you're a fan of one of the matches on there in particular.
That would be Mick Foley versus Edge. It's just that moment of watching Edge spear Foley through the ropes, then through a flaming table, all in one swift move, then watching Foley basically on fire.
That was a really good year, to be fair, for Foley. Did the thing at One Night Stand later on in the year too. And also, I think he was very integral to the development of both Randy Orton and Edge, because he gave them both these hardcore matches. You know, he gave Orton one obviously at Backlash a few years earlier, and then against Edge that year. But I think it does help make them stars and seem more credible, because it was the first time you were seeing them outside of, obviously, especially with Edge, outside of TLC matches. First time you've seen them, take a lot of that punishment. And it was very important, that one. But yeah, talking of early Manias then, it was something which I caught up with Champagne Charlie to talk about. And he had a lot to say about it. So let's have a look what we had to say about WrestleManias 1 through 9. Hi there, Champagne Charlie. Thanks for joining us. We're here to discuss some of the early WrestleMania moments, all that Hulkamania era, and the kind of rock and wrestling and everything that came from that. What's your kind of favourite early WrestleMania moment then?
It's very difficult to say, because there are a lot of great moments. I mean, if you look at those early WrestleManias up until WrestleMania 30, it was really a passing of the torch on multiple scales, because the first 6 or 7 Manias were prime with the era of Hulk Hogan, right? And then slowly but surely, you started getting the newer stars come in, like your Bret Harts, your Shawn Michaels, etc. So we really saw the changing of eras right before our eyes during that time, I feel. Here's the thing, when WrestleMania first started, it was just an experimental show. That's what it was. Yeah, I mean, if it had failed, they would have gone under completely. And I've watched the first WrestleMania. You can tell how nervous everyone is, and there's a couple of glitches here and there. You've got Lord Alfred Hage, who's stumbling his words backstage. Mean Gene Okerlund was forced to sing the national anthem at last minute, because apparently the guests they got to do that backed out on the day.
Oh, okay.
So
didn't know that.
Yeah, that's actually true. They had I don't know who it was, but they had booked some big singer to do the national anthem, and they backed out on the day. And they just said to Gene, "You do it." So the matches that stick out with WrestleMania 1 are things like the tag title match between Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov versus the US I think it's the US Express, something like that. With Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. Body slam match, Andre the Giant and Big John Studd, and of course
that is so 80s. When you think about a match that's so 80s, a body slam match, that is so 80s.
Yeah, yeah, because you don't get those things anymore. So
no.
And it was those first couple of WrestleManias were primarily rock and wrestling connection based, weren't they? So,
well, yeah, because obviously this stemmed obviously off the MTV kind of era deal they had with Cyndi Lauper, who did an amazing deal kind of leading up to WrestleMania 1.
WrestleMania 2 was very, very confusing to me, you know, of the three different broadcasts that happened. You know what I mean? The New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. It didn't make any sense why they would do that.
And then to me, it always is a bit odd with WrestleMania 2, because obviously they had the three main events. They had the football main event, the Battle Royal, then they had the Roddy Piper and Mr. T boxing match, and people get a chance to go and watch
that was awful.
some and Piper's shoot promos on Mr. T. He absolutely hated him. Absolutely hated him. I mean, obviously the main
it was legit. Yeah, it was absolutely legit. And then, of course, Hogan and Bundy, you know, in the cage match. WrestleMania 3 is probably the one that tips the cap, though, because of how big the arena was, and it was a huge indoor record. You know what I mean? I believe it's over 93,000 people. So
it's
and
mad.
It was that thing of Hogan versus, and it was just the magnitude of Hogan versus Andre at that point as well. So.
It was such a huge, important match, obviously. You know, in my WrestleMania reviews, I did that. You know, I couldn't rate that match because it's awful. Like in terms of in ring,
Hogan was on his last. So Andre was on his last legs at that point.
Yeah, you can tell he's in pain, taking kind of every move, and you know, but the importance of that match, that match got us all the great moments, kind of 35 years almost down the line, and so it's. You know, Meltzer gave him like -4 stars. It was like the worst match of that year. But what it did for the business, you know, it made WrestleMania the global phenomenon that it has become, I think.
Mania 4 was very, very confusing with the whole tournament aspect, wasn't it? That was not. Yeah, that was done after I think the attempted buying of the title by Ted
DiBiase. He tried to buy it off Andre.
Yeah, WrestleMania 5, the Mega Powers exploding. I mean, that was a great story. WrestleMania 6, the Ultimate Challenge,
and it was an Ultimate Challenge.
So,
I think it was a really.
It was.
That's a match I think for obviously maybe people a little bit older than me. That was like when it was the first time you kind of ever had your two big baby faces collide. You know, and in a rarity, you had the WWF and the Intercontinental Championships on the line at once, which at that time was a big deal because that was they only had 3 belts. Now they have 20 or something.
WrestleMania 7 was wrapped in controversy because of the whole Middle Eastern sympathizer thing that Sergeant Slaughter was doing at the time.
Yes, and one of those few occasions where the WWF lied
to the point where I think he was getting death threats at the time or something like that. So
it didn't go well, and obviously they had to move it because security concerns. But it was also weird because they couldn't sell the tickets. They moved it from obviously the Los Angeles stadium, whatever it was, Coliseum Stadium, and they couldn't fill it, so they moved it to the arena. And did it, but they had nowhere near the ticket sales, and I think it's because this angle really kind of pushed people away.
WrestleMania 7 was also the official starting date of the streak as well, with the Undertaker's WrestleMania debut against Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
They're a bit odd watching some of the early streak matches back because I do have there's maybe another video, but when they thought that the streak was a thing, obviously the first couple of years I couldn't have done, but then obviously when it comes to like 4 or 5,
it happened by accident. It happened by accident. No, they started noticing it when it got to 10. That was the thing.
Okay.
So
that's way longer than I thought then.
Yeah. So that was WrestleMania 7. WrestleMania 8 the following year. That ending was a clusterfuck, with the Hogan versus Sid match. You know what I mean? Papa Shango famously missing his cue, and the so-called lackluster return of the Ultimate Warrior at that point as well.
Yeah, I think because that was when obviously Warrior was in and out because of several different issues backstage.
It was due to apparently it was like holding Vince up for money or something like that.
Yeah, it's at SummerSlam. Yeah, SummerSlam.
Yeah. And here's the thing: by the time Warrior came back, some people had started paying attention to other people at that point. I mean, Hogan was still there, but it was coming to a point where people were starting to make themselves known. new stars, etc.
Also, with WrestleMania 8, you had the fact that many people were wanting it to be Hogan and Flair, but they tested it on house shows and it didn't draw.
Yeah, exactly.
Very odd. It's very odd.
It is very odd because everyone had talked about it for years in the magazines and stuff like that. Hogan v Flair, that was the one everyone wanted to see because they were polar opposites of the spectrum when it comes to what their characters were.
Yeah, and obviously of the first 10 WrestleManias, that was only the second time that the WWF Championship wasn't defended last. The first time being the first Mania, the tag team match, obviously, and this being the second time when obviously Hogan faced Sid. And I did rate it the worst of the first 10 WrestleMania main events. I think it was probably earned that.
Savage and Flair delivered, though. You have to give them that,
definitely.
I think. So,
definitely. And you had that whole controversy over, obviously, the blade jobs in that match. Bret Hart and Roddy Piper had a match for the IC Championship, and they bled that, but they got away with it because they did it in a way that was believed to be more real, so accidental kind of blood. Whereas, obviously, Savage and Flair did it, and it was a very blatant blade job. And they got fined for it at a time when obviously there was no blood allowed in the federation. Obviously, one of the many times they've done that.
Then we come to WrestleMania 9, which took place in Las Vegas. Las Vegas. Here's the thing: I loved the setup of it. I really did. The whole togas and Roman / Egyptian.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
It was
gimmick shows.
And also the debut of Jim Ross in the WWE as well.
Indeed.
That show, yeah. But unfortunately, the matches themselves were not up to par at all. The match that The Undertaker had the worst finish ever.
Yeah.
John Gonzalez being disqualified by the use of chloroform. The man was 8 foot tall and you're using chloroform to take out a guy who's smaller than you. That is alien to me. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Taking that's odd about the early WrestleManias is the amount of matches that end with non-finishes, like DQs, count outs. It's really odd watch from if you're a modern fan rewatching, want to watch them and start now. It's really odd to think the big spectacle WrestleMania and matches would just end in a DQ or a count out, and there's a number of them that happen.
Yeah, best match of that night had to be, I think, the Intercontinental title match, Shawn Michaels versus Tatanka.
And wasn't that a DQ?
I think it was, but they were the most athletic in that show, I think. However, I think the narcissist Lex Luger and Mr. Perfect was an okay match as well.
Yeah, Lex never really worked for me in the WWF though.
He was more over. Here's the thing: sadly, both NWA and WWE they tried to make Lex Luger like the second coming of Hulk Hogan, and it never worked. That was the problem. Yeah,
it didn't work.
Let's see. Speaking of Hulk Hogan and Beefcake versus Money Inc. for the tag team titles.
Yeah, didn't that end a DQ as well?
Yeah. It's kind of, there's a running theme here, isn't there? So and then of course we come to the main event or main events, so to speak.
Yeah.
We have Yokozuna and Bret Hart. Which was a good match. You know what I mean? It was a bit of an odd. Apparently, they missed a bit at the end, which was why it took ages for Fuji to get his ceremonial salt out. In Hart's Faith. That was that. If they'd have left it there, that was fine. But no, they have to bring in Hulkster, don't they? So
and as you know, I'm a Hogan fan, but even I at the time, when I was a kid.
By this point, they'd stopped giving a shit. Fans had stopped giving a shit about Hogan. That was the thing. So,
well, I'd argue older fans had. Kids still loved that finish. And as a kid, I think I can see why I liked it. But going back, it only benefited Hulk Hogan and no one else. Because he was gone from the Federation within the 4 months, basically. Lost the belt to Yokozuna and then disappeared, obviously, for at least 9 years or so. Yeah, but look, there's some great moments there. How can we also forget the Savage and Warrior retirement match at WrestleMania?
Yeah, of course, WrestleMania 7.
Just fantastic stuff, done there. And just everything. I think Miss Elizabeth Shirley, she was so good at her role when she was involved in it's one of those examples of using a female talent just really well, I think. And the WWF really.
It was the first time with Savage and Matt and Elizabeth. It was the first time you had a heel character such as the Macho Man, and so Miss Elizabeth, who was obviously a face. The idea was you hated Randy but felt sorry for Miss Elizabeth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He would do things like just give her a look if she stepped away from where he put. He was like, all that kind of stuff all the time. And if you look back at his matches, he would like get out of the ring, lead her to one area, say stand there, and then she would move. He'd get out and go, like, no, I told you to stand over here. So
yeah.
So,
I mean, obviously, it mirrored kind of what was going on in their personal lives too. Sadly, as we'd find out many years later. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, and obviously some great moments there. Well, that was Champagne Charlie, and we spoke obviously about a lot of the early WrestleManias. They're quite a classic kind of thing. I don't know, like maybe because you're a bit younger, have you had a chance to watch many of these early Manias?
Yeah, I've watched a handful, namely Mania 6.
Oh, one.
Because if I remember correctly, the main event was Hogan versus Warrior.
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, not unification, but title versus title, winner takes all. IC title versus... That was when they had the yellow IC title, my favourite.
Indeed.
And it was the World Championship or the WWF Championship?
WWF, yeah.
Yeah. I think...
Yeah, that is good times.
Out of 1 through 9, 6 was my favourite. Only for the main event.
Well, let us know, guys, what you think. What's your favourite of the early WrestleManias? But we're going to move on. We talked to Andros basically about some of the hardcore moments at Mania. We touched upon earlier on your love of the Mick Foley Edge match. What kind of your other favourite kind of hardcore moments at WrestleMania?
Right, let me clarify. I know this match was a mess, but the idea for it was solid. The only reason it was a mess really is just because there was no sort of planning behind it, except for the finish, which didn't even go to plan. And that was the hardcore battle royal with Crash.
Yeah.
Not only winning the championship, not only be going in the champion, but then losing it when he wasn't meant to.
Yeah. This is a very awkward concept. WrestleMania 2000. One of those crazy WrestleManias because no match had a normal singles match at all in the entire card. And the hardcore battle royal, I don't think they knew what a battle royal was. They forgot for 1 year. It took them a whole year. But at WrestleMania X7, they always had the gimmick battle royal with Jim Cornette and the Goon and Gobbledygooker in it. But yeah, it was a very this was scramble, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I was going to say it's like the birth of the championship scramble match.
They need to bring those back, by the way.
Definitely.
They watch it, but literally, it's such a good concept because it gets even mid carders in the title scene, which they need because obviously there are only a few main eventers now in WWE. I think that's quite good.
It's kind of like a gauntlet match, but without the eliminations. If you think about it,
kind of. It's got that fun factor to it, though.
Yeah,
because obviously, basically, I think the clock watch matches they do become a bit like. There was that jeopardy had to get close to the end, like stuff like the Iron Man matches, but they're more wrestling based and more feudy based. Whereas I think this it's quite fun, isn't it? And you can have a champion have multiple challenges, and it's quite fun.
Multiple losses.
Indeed, and with the championship scramble, that was when they were coming in every few minutes, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah,
they're coming in every few minutes, and then so the match changes each time. So that's how you.
There's more risk to a title.
Definitely.
For every competitor that comes in. And it doesn't even... Because I'm pretty sure the Championship Scrambles only had 5 competitors.
Yeah, it was just 5.
At first. But you could have as many as you wanted and make it even more dangerous. I think that was the issue with the hardcore Battle Royal, though, is they had too many people.
I agree. But I think it was 13 people. There's 13 people. And there's a lot of matches they've had at Mania that have had lots of people, to be fair.
Yeah.
And one of them that I spoke to about with Andros, you're going to see in a second, is the IC title ladder matches. So let's carry on over to Andros Jay. Okay, thanks for joining me, Andros. And we're here to discuss some more WrestleMania moments and discussing with you some of the more kind of extreme, high-flying, kind of out-there moments that have happened. We've been treated in the last few years, to be fair, to some real kind of big moments. I'm guessing that your favourite big moments going to involve a certain Jeff Hardy. So let's get straight to it. What's your favourite kind of Hardy Boys or Jeff moment at WrestleMania?
Well, my all-time favourite WrestleMania is WrestleMania 17, the triple threat ladder match. So I'm always going to stick to that. Obviously, shout-out moments when the Hardy Boys returns because, the match itself wasn't one of the greatest matches, but just to hear that pop it's next level. It still brings me chills just hearing that,
Yeah. I think that was good because everyone thought the New Day were going to put themselves in it. And that would have been fine, because obviously, it's, they're popular. But then, to have the Hardy Boys, because didn't they do like a Ring of Honor show the night before or something? Or
it was, literally the night before, and everyone was still thinking they was under contract. Well, obviously, that weren't the case, and then they just popped up at WrestleMania without anyone knowing.
Yeah, win the tag belts. Definitely, the first TLC match, or second TLC match, sorry, it's the first one at SummerSlam. But the second TLC match at WrestleMania 17, that's definitely a moment. That spear on the top of the ladder, just like, oh my God, that's iconic for certain.
It is. Like, you talk about anything about WrestleMania 17, it's one of the first things that come up is that spear off that ladder. It's just, it's ingrained in people's memories.
I think even with ladder matches, which, touched upon it on another interview I think I had with Jack Walker, but I think one of those where it just, it's the bar really when it comes to ladder matches, that, like, all the spots that we still see now really stem from that. I don't think the bar's been broken since then.
No.
I think it hasn't been.
I don't think it ever will be. I think they set that bar so high in those triple threat ladder matches. I don't think that's ever going to be broken at any point soon.
Yeah, I think now what they try to do is they do more extreme spots, but not as in they do more of them more frequent in ladder matches, but they won't ever be able to top that initial spot. So it's another moment I'm a fan of. To be fair, one of the two matches I'm a fan of actually was when they were doing the ladder matches for the Intercontinental Championship. They did them back-to-back years at 31 and 32. Daniel Bryan won one, and Zack Ryder shockingly won the second one at WrestleMania 32. That was a great kind of moment, I think. No one would have called that. No, he lost the title that next day, but that was just such a great kind of image. Zack Ryder finally getting a WrestleMania moment.
It was, especially back then, I wasn't that much of a huge fan of Ryder. I've grown to like him a lot more now, but it just threw me off so much. It's like, really? Ryder? It's okay, fair enough.
Yeah, obviously he wasn't lucky enough to keep on with the championship. He did actually win tag championships at Mania as well, believe it or not. I think in 2019. And then, they lost them not too long afterwards either. But it was nice having that moment at the top of the ladder with Ryder. And the ladder match, I think, was a good way of getting a lot of the undercard talent, like Dolph Ziggler, Kevin Owens, etc., Stardust, onto the card for WrestleMania.
All those really good workers, gave them a moment to shine. It kind of makes you remember how good those guys really are.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Another person we have to talk about really now is Shane McMahon, who's in the recent years had obviously a bit of a mixed bag at Mania, really. Obviously, did a tag match, obviously, with Daniel Bryan and against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Wrestled a kind of normal wrestling match against AJ Styles. But the most kind of moment we're going to talk about, obviously, is Shane's cell dive in front of his children at WrestleMania 32 against The Undertaker. That was insane. That was mental.
I just remember watching this guy is actually going to die now. Jesus Christ. I think he got to the point where he was just like, I have to do it now. It's every time he gets near a cage, he's like, I'm just going to have to do it no matter what happens.
If he's on WrestleMania 37, it's looking like he'll be facing Braun Strowman. Do we think that he'll jump off something if he gets onto WrestleMania again? He's got to, sure.
I reckon they'll both climb to the top of a cage and Braun will gorilla press him off the cage through the announce table.
You know what match I'd be worried to see happen at Mania? It would be Shane against Jeff, because who would jump? Will they both start at the top? Would we have another Mankind and Undertaker situation or something?
It'd be like it's one big Spanish fire. They just grab each other, hug, and jump off together.
Because they both like jumping off stuff, it seems. And obviously, a lot of no holds barred matches have taken place at WrestleMania over the past few years. Triple H and Brock Lesnar have won. Triple H, I think Triple H and a few people. Triple H and Sting, Triple H and Batista. They've all had no holds barred kind of matches. I think they realise that it's important to get some of that out, especially at these longer Manias where obviously, they are a bit long now. Some of them 5, 6, 7 hours, all in for the time you had the pre-show and stuff. I think it's important they understand you need one of the kind of matches kind of on there. Shane and The Miz as well had a massive hardcore.
Oh, they did, didn't they? Yeah, I remember you that now. Now you say, I remember, yeah.
I think it was 35. They did the suplex off the
Yeah,
some platform thing.
scaffolding or whatever it was.
Scaffolding that had a platform for no apparent reason, and then they got superplex off it.
And he also did quite a hardcore match against his dad as well, against Vince, didn't he?
Yeah, at Mania 17.
Yeah.
That was the week.
He did the big coast to coast.
God, yeah. God, that move. Some great moments, but some scary moments of that. Do you remember when, obviously not WrestleMania, but Survivor Series, when he was speared? Like, he jumped off it and hit. Roman Reigns hit a spear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was at Survivor Series a few years ago, and everyone thought he died because it was insane. Shane's definitely up there for, I think, one of the kind of hardcore legends, I guess, in a weird way, in terms of WrestleMania.
He is like when you think of like extreme moments, like Shane isn't initially one that comes to your head, but like the more you deep dive into the history of WrestleMania, his name comes up a lot.
Yeah, especially like I said, in recent years, he's had at least 3 of them. So yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see if Jeff can create one more. I think he's got one more in him.
I think he's got one last good run in him, and that's it. One last good run.
And hope, perhaps obviously at WrestleMania 37 he can be featured in some sort of contest, and I know you'd enjoy that. But yeah, so like, what is your last question to you then? What is your favorite WrestleMania match then, apart from the TLC you've mentioned?
Yeah. See, I'm probably going to get a little bit of hate for this, but generally it surprised me so much that I loved this match because it just threw me off so much at the time. But I really loved Undertaker versus John Cena. I really loved it. It's a wild card, but it surprised me so much at the time that Taker just squashed John. Apart from the big boot, we'll mention that now. Apart from that big boot, that was horrendous. But I genuinely love that match for some God knows reason.
The thing is, I'll play devil's advocate here and say that in recent times anyway, one of my favourite WrestleMania matches was Brock and Goldberg at WrestleMania 33, because it's just a match that does what it says on the tin. And obviously, I think similar lines to what you said there, with regards to Undertaker Cena, in the sense of, as we know with Undertaker, sadly, as it's gone past kind of the park in the 5 years, he can't go more than 10, 15 minutes. And obviously the cinematic match he had, the boneyard match he had with AJ last year at Mania, that's probably the best we're going to see him. And then in terms of in the ring, like, I think that was probably the best we can see him too, just basically being a highlights reel for obviously stuff, all the moves he does. And in terms of, like I said, going back to our initial thing, like I said, of these 5-6 hour Mania cards, you can't have every match be like half an hour,
Exactly.
And that's why I think you need those matches like Brock, and that's why I love Brock and Goldberg. It did what it said in the tin. It was 2 big guys who, had those amazing streaks and amazing, power moves and stuff, just literally batted each other for 5 minutes. Brock won. That was it, and it was like 5 minutes long.
Didn't need anything else. It completely filled its purpose.
But yeah, no, that is a shocker, and it's not one I thought you'd say. Hopefully, you won't get too much backlash for that. It is actually quite a good match, to be fair, and it involves 2 other company's top guys. But anyway, thanks for that, Andros.
That's all good.
Thank you. So yeah, Andros Jay there chatting about all sorts of extreme and fun moments at WrestleMania. So we're going to go into something a bit different now. So obviously, with the WrestleManias in recent years and the recent kind of acquisition of NXT, merging that onto the WrestleMania card, it is likely we're going to see a lot of these kind of, indie kind of dream matches take place on the biggest stage of them all, which I know for you and for many other fans, it's a huge kind of deal. So question to you then. Pick a person from the WWE roster to have a sort of forbidden door match with at WrestleMania. Who are you picking from WWE and who you're picking from outside of the
right? So let's just pretend that Matt Hardy is still tag team with Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I would go with, just a regular tag match, the Hardy Boys versus the Motor City Machine Guns.
Oh, that's like making your 2 favorite tag teams.
Essentially, yeah, like my favorite WWE tag team, my favorite all-time tag team, but it's just, I think that combination of the hardcore style from Hardy and Matt, like the high risk style rather, going against the tag team, like just the chemistry between the Motor City Machine Guns, I think would make an outstanding match. Because you'll have all the spots from the Hardys with all of the actual tag wrestling from the Motor City Machine Guns.
they're both tag teams, and it's definitely something which I think if WWE ever decide to want to care about the tag division again, it's something which I'd like to see happen. So that's not a bad one. I know Andros as well is a big fan of both those tag teams mentioned, definitely of the Hardys, and so we definitely be something. But interesting, you chose a normal kind of match. But expect, sometimes at WrestleMania like to showcase stuff in the, stuff like the ladder matches, hardcore matches, etc. But I think to have like it's nice sometimes to have a straightforward tag team contest. And back in the early Manias, they were good with that. They had lots of straightforward tag team contests with teams such as the Heart Foundation, the Rockers, Demolition, etc.
Well, they didn't have loads of gimmicky matches for tag teams back then. It wasn't really, it wasn't really until Hardy's, Dudley's, and Edge and Christian came in, as mentioned by Andros, that tag matches got gimmicks. That was when gimmicks were heavily used, I think, personally.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think they saw at the turn of millennium when they saw the 3 tag teams they had that were the main tag teams. They brought in those weapons, and that ended up becoming a big part of the division. But that was something, we were talking about, not so much the tag team stuff, but also some of the independent stars. There's so many independent stars that I think could do well inside the WWE bubble. And I was able to speak to Jack Toreno regarding some of these matches.
Okay, so Jack Toreno is joining me, and he's making his Talking Crap debut. And we're going to discuss some of the more kind of indie-rific moments at Mania. Obviously, over the past kind of 5 years, definitely, they definitely showcased people like AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, and even before that, you could say they showcased people obviously like CM Punk, Daniel Bryan. Obviously, as an independent wrestler, as someone who's obviously on indie scene, like, has that been something which has been, kind of beneficial to see that, there are guys obviously who start, in the bingo halls, as WWE like to say all the time, and end up, main eventing the biggest show, in wrestling. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, it's definitely been inspiring, especially like when you see when you follow a lot of those guys' careers on the indie scene, and you just see them like rise, and to see someone like Daniel Bryan not only open up a WrestleMania, but then main event and WrestleMania on like the same WrestleMania, and winning like the most prestigious title that WWE has. It's very inspiring to see that rise of them, you know what I mean? And it translates well to other people watching.
Yeah.
Very well, like in that case specifically. But I think it's just cool. I think it's just cool to see people that have come from the independent scene having that amount of success.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they've even had, AJ and Shinsuke had their rivalry. And obviously, I know you're a fan of New Japan. And I know that was a match that was spotlighted on Wrestle Kingdom. But it's safe to say that it didn't really get the same reception, the feud, when it obviously came to the main roster of WWE. Like, why do you think there was that disconnect? Or was it a match you enjoyed and maybe thought was underrated?
It was fine. It was like a WWE produced match. Let's put it that way. Like, because the main difference between, there's like several differences between New Japan and WWE, but I think like the main difference, or two main differences, is one, I think the work rate from New Japan is more of a sports spaced presentation as opposed to entertainment predominantly based promotion. So they have more of a platform and encouraged to go all out and be as athletic as possible and tell a story from a sports perspective. From their match from WWE at WrestleMania, that match was more to enhance WWE's vision of a story. That match was essentially the beginning of a feud, because it carried on after WrestleMania, didn't it?
They have like 2 matches after.
I think it might have,
because the whole low blow thing.
I think they might. Yeah, I think they had at least 2 rematches. They like to do it in 3s, didn't they, on pay-per-views?
Yeah.
But like it was the match was the problem with having independent stars on WWE platform is that when the WWE give you the match that fans want from like the independent scene, I think fans tend to like overhype it or they get like too hyped about it, and it's like, you know, going in, you should know it's like not going to be what it was on the indies. You know, it can't be, because like WWE's not that sort of promotion.
I get that.
You know, it's all about the sizzle, not the steak with them. And if you do get steak with it, then fair enough. But like WWE isn't, and doesn't really care about work rate that much. Just as long as it tells the stories that they want them to tell. I do find it weird that, I mean, obviously, like in that scenario, it was just the start of the feud, really, because Shinsuke won the Royal Rumble that year, which led on to the match for WrestleMania. But usually, like WrestleMania, like if it doesn't end feuds, it's at least far into the story. So like the blow off is like the next pay-per-view. If it's not the blow off at WrestleMania, that makes sense. To me, it just felt weird that they were like starting the feud really then. At their big show.
I think maybe they were banking on, obviously, like New Japan have with like Okada and Omega, when they've done like one match at Wrestle Kingdom, then they've done another match at Dominion, I think, so a big event. And so I think maybe they're banking on something like that. But it was a very weird year as a whole for AJ Styles that year, because he went from that feud, I think, into Samoa Joe feud, again with like 3 matches. And obviously now they seem to abandon this rematch rule to an extent, only when it comes back. But what I'm going to say, actually, something which is more prevalent in the recent years' Manias, obviously COVID Manias aside, because they've been a bit different with the 2 nights, but I'd argue that with Manias now obviously being like 4-5 hours, well, and more when you plus the pre-show, I think when you add in some of those, when you add in the fact that AJ and Shinsuke probably went on about 4.5 hours into fans sitting down, I think that has somewhat of an effect too on the crowd's response, because you can't be up for 5 hours. And I think something what they did when they had Rollins and Brock on, they won first, and the reception to that was like really like high, like on the flip side of that. So I think there's also that to think, because there's so many indie stars, especially when we look at definitely WrestleMania like 2019 and the year before, when you had like so many indie stars all throughout the card. You can't obviously always fit everyone on. But do you think that WrestleMania is better when, because you mentioned WrestleMania 30. WrestleMania 30 is interesting because I think that Mania only had 8 matches on it in total. And obviously we got to, I think last year, well, over 2 nights, there's 16 matches. And then the year before, it was producing, it's been about 14 or 15 matches like every year for the past few years. Do you think it works better when it's more concentrated, when it's 8 matches that you really excited about? Or do you think it should be the massive, however many matches they want?
For me personally, I think the WrestleManias are better when it's more concentrated and not everyone gets on the card. And I can see why they want everyone to get on the card, because everyone wants like the spotlight, in some more fashion, even if it's just like they throw like the Battle Royals every year, whether it be on the pre-show or the main show. They do just to get everyone on the cards as a thank you for surviving our year in WWE kind of thing. But I like some of like the better WrestleManias have been ones where they have like fewer matches, but have more story leading into the match of WrestleMania. So like you get more hyped, and it gets given more time as well to tell a story, because obviously like you'll have like some undercard matches, but like a good portion of the matches are going to be like your money matches, or it should be your money matches. I mean, which I think was a good thing last year, that it did get split up into 2 nights. Not only
so much easier to watch 2 nights.
But not only was it so much easier to watch, but like the big matches that they wanted to promote had more staying power and significance, because there was big matches split up between both nights. So you had like a couple of prelims on night 1, and then like you had was Bray Wyatt Firefly Funhouse on the first night or second night? Second night. But there was that, and there was that in the Boneyard. Would that have got the reception that it did if it was all one block 8-hour WrestleMania would have got the same reception, would have had the same impact. I don't think so.
I don't think it would either. I think obviously with cinematic matches to split them up, it's quite a good idea. And then they had the long Edge Norton match as well, which obviously didn't really go down too well. But you couldn't have had a long Edge Norton match plus a long cinematic match plus 2 world title matches and the women's tag. It's long. It's like I said, it's gonna be 8 hours all in before you. But I think over 2 nights it's much better.
Yeah, and not only that, because with those cinematic matches, it benefited them to an extent that they had no fans in the arena. It was all like viewing on the network or on pay-per-view. I
think last year they definitely capitalised, and for us, obviously wrestling for us in the UK stopped pretty much only like 2 weeks before WrestleMania, about 2-3 weeks before WrestleMania. So I guess it was like the first and only kind of event we was able to even watch. So I think that added to it even more.
I just hope they don't go down that route when with this upcoming WrestleMania, where they'll like throw in like a cinematic match, because they're wanting fans in attendance for it. For both nights. Is this going to be 2 nights? It is.
Yeah, 2 nights. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Like I just hope they don't know that, because imagine like paying all that money to go to like WrestleMania and you're one of like the select few, because it can't be like full capacity, but like one of like the select 1,000 to go and watch it, and then you sat there watching a match or several matches on a TV screen. Yeah. He loses the live atmosphere.
We shall see. The Fiend is meant to be part of the card, so we'll see. He's usually the one who would have those kind of matches. But look, final question for you then. So, what's been out of that the past, let's say 10 years, your favourite WrestleMania match or moment?
There's so many. For the one that stood out for me the most was probably WrestleMania 30, because I only watched part of it live, and that was like the second half of WrestleMania 30. So I got to watch Undertaker's streak ending, followed by like a random Divas match, then like Daniel Bryan winning the big one at WrestleMania. Like that to me, like in the past 10 years, that was probably like the biggest impact it had on me as a fan, because it made me a fan. That was like I got the enjoyment out of being a fan again, watching those 2 moments back to back.
Yeah, it felt big at that Mania, I must admit.
Yeah, it was like to use the trope, a WrestleMania moment.
I don't know what it is with the obviously anniversary Manias, obviously, because obviously the first one at Madison Square Garden, and then obviously 10 and 20 both at MSG, and 30 obviously went to Louisiana, and obviously because it's now stadiums, as we know. But obviously, going into 30, it was very much like, you wanted it to be something big, and they did obviously the biggest thing they could do, was to end the streak, which obviously is something which we'll have another discussion where they should have ended it. But I think if you're going to do it at your bigger show, and they chose that moment. Thanks, Torino, for joining us, and we will catch up with you again soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Bye bye.
Okay, so that's all we've got time for this episode. Thank you for our guests, of course, the wonderful Andros Jay, Champagne Charlie, of course, our team member, and Jack Toreno making his Talking Crap debut. We'll be joined next time, and that'll be over on Facebook by both Vinnie Daniels and Charlie Brooks. Until then, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I've been Lucas Jackson, John Josh, and you've been watching our WrestleMania special, Part 1.
Take it easy.